my YouTube this afternoon. So welcome everybody to my class on my journey through experimental reconstruction of women's Hittite clothing. My name is Ana Dokainina Sirakusina. I currently live in the kingdom of Trimaris. I collect kingdoms, so sometimes people don't know where I am, but right now I'm in Trimaris. And so I do have a PowerPoint to go through this. Feel free to ask a question at any time. I don't mind. And of course, Columnella is our lovely moderator of the day. So thank you so much, Columnella, for being here and being awesome. So share screen, here we go. Work with me here. There it is. All right. Whoops. Let me go back. Back. All right. Let me move. I really don't like how the pictures overlap, but okay. All right. Here's all the good stuff. Experimental reconstruction of Hittite women's dress, or Blame Amenhotep, now known as Inanna. As I've already stated, my name is Ana Dokainina Sirakusina, currently living in Trimaris. Please feel free to visit my website, anazarome.com, as well as my email is right here, sirakusina@gmail.com. So let's go ahead and get this party started. Who were the Hittites? A lot of people, they hear it, they're like, I know that term. Where did it come from? What is this? And most of it comes from mentions in the Hebrew Bible, but they were an actual civilization in the middle of Anatolia from about 1700 BCE to about 1200 BCE. So middle to late Bronze Age. They were in fact mentioned in the Bible. Admit, so. And but no actual material culture or evidence of their civilization was found until the 1830s. So as far as discoveries go, it is archaeologically relatively new. The language is Indo-European rather than Semitic, as we are more familiar with like Sumerian, Akkadian, Hebrew, Egyptian. Those are Semitic. Modern Arabic is a Semitic language. Nessite, which was the language of the Hittites, is Indo-European. So it's actually much more similar to our words than to the words of the Middle East. For example, the word water is the same in both English and Nessite. It's just spelled, it's water versus watar. So if you were suddenly transported to Hattusa in like 1500 BC, it would actually, and you needed water, they would actually be able to understand you. They did write in cuneiform, which of course is the syllabic writing style of the time, and corresponded on clay tablets to both Babylonia and Egypt. A lot of treaties, a lot of good stuff. So lots and lots of cool documentation is being discovered. The term Hittite is a disambiguation, mostly taken from translations of the Hebrew Bible. They referred to themselves as the people of the land of Hatti. That term comes from the name of their capital, which is Hattusa, right here, just a little south of where modern-day Ankara is today. And of course, they were possibly the Trojans. So over here in a region called Huilusa, you see where Troy is marked out. Why Hittite? Well, pull up a chair. So when you see an opening, you take it. I was first introduced to the historical Hittites in graduate school. One of my professors focused on them. He is a graduate of the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago. He was actually teaching classical Greek, earlier Greek, sorry, Dark Age and Archaic Greek at the time. So as we got into the discussion of Homer, he taught us about the Achiawa, which is the Hittite term for the Mycenaean Greeks. And then all of a sudden we're like, what? This is pretty cool. And it kind of got pushed toward the back of my head, but I decided I really wanted to revisit it at some point in time. To this date, as I have previously mentioned, I have found no reconstruction of Hittite dress outside of dramatic documentaries. I have been able to correspond with some scholars through the amazing website of academia.edu. There are books in progress. There's just hasn't really been an actual comprehensive study on Hittite dress and textiles as of yet. There are articles. I will be posting all of that good bibliography goodness on my website on, you know, on the completion of this. And Arad, you're super excited, but you know I already sent you all this stuff. But I gave him the hookups. So yeah, so basically I'm filling in the gap with clothing, and this is strictly through observation, looking at artistic record. Understanding the sources that we have, there's not a lot aside from, you know, the clay tablets that we have of trade records involving wool and linen, some dye stuffs. We don't have any extant textiles. We don't have a lot of information exactly on how things were manufactured and worn. And this runs the gamut of the Bronze Age. So this is a lot of new work is being done in this field. I do expect that I'm going to need to make a lot of changes. I'm probably going to be proven outright wrong on a lot of things, but that is part and parcel when you're breaking new ground, unfortunately. So the language, as I previously mentioned, they refer to it as Nessite. It is Indo-European. Just a quick review, what I just previously mentioned, where you have the comparison between water and watar, and that was sort of the gateway for scholars to be able to begin translation of this language. So we have the orthostates, and relief carvings. We have a lot of carvings from later Hittite and then the Neo-Hittite states. Most of them are orthostates, which are large slabs at doorways that were very intricately carved at this period. Most of them, at least the Hittite ones, show gods, kings and queens, and processions. So they're a little bit dramatic. They're probably a little more embellished than what was possible in period and full of symbolism. So, you know, for anyone who has taken art history classes, this is unfortunately one of the things that you can't take at face value, but right now I might not have much of a choice. The Huse Indere vases. So this is actually what I'm wearing today. I will get into that momentarily. So fragments of 4 full vases were found in 1997 at a site near the Turkish town of Yorkulu. I cannot speak Turkish. All those umlauts, it's great. But it shows processions of dancers, clerics, gods, royalty. And what's super cool is that vase number 2 shows bull jumping. And if you're familiar with Mycenaean stuff and Minoan artwork, bull jumping was a thing. It is a little different. Of course, the artwork is visibly Hittite and not Mycenaean Greek or Ahijawan, but apparently it was a common sport. I haven't gotten too much into that yet, but I'm very excited. So this is early Hittite. You're talking 1650 BCE. And the bling, everyone loves bling. Bling tends to last a lot longer than fibers, thankfully. Due to the nature of quarantine, I haven't been able to get effective contact with people at the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations in Ankara. Their website is actually down, and so finding people to even like contact with was a little difficult. But we do have the Met, we do have the British Museum, so I guess colonialism has actually been a little beneficial in this case. But you know, when I had to open my query into more generic Anatolian versus just blatant Hittite. So it gave me the Hattians. I also have the Luwians, Bithynia, and then you have Lydia, and then of course the Ahiawa, which are the Minoan Greeks at the time, and then of course Babylon and Assyria and Egypt. So up here, are the jewels of Helen as part of the treasures of Priam. This is found by Heinrich Schliemann at Troy. The layers that they were found in were much lower than where the battle or the Trojan War would have taken place. So it might even be Proto-Hittite or Proto-Pelusian, or it could also be fake. So I decided I was going to skip that for now until I have a little bit more conclusive evidence and can get in contact with people who can tell me more. But right now, more recent information has brought it up as, you know, a potential fraud. This right here with the eagles is an actual Hittite piece. I love the way that it's strung on wire. The piece that I'm wearing today is actually constructed in a similar fashion. And eagles, and especially double-headed eagles, were insanely popular in Anatolia at this time. It is where Rome and Byzantium actually got their symbolism from, was the Hittite ruins. So there you have it, the more you know. Contemporary material culture. So I had to look again outside of Anatolia, going into Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Ahiawa. And so that image right there is of Babylonian gold. But some of these beads are actually very similar to what you can find now at even Michael's. The styles really have not changed. You have your little lunar pendant. And there was enough similarities with what I have found, at least for Hattian and Hittite styles, to where using a little bit of a close-up of these Babylonian styles was super cool. I actually love these little dudes, these little figures. I think they're pendants, but and this is at the Met, by the way, so you can go to their website and pull it up, but they're super detailed, and I'm just like, wow, I wish I had that mad skills. Oh, and of course the Old Testament. So especially when it comes to gemstones, a lot of people are like, oh, I can't find a whole lot. Here's the rub. The Bible is a primary source for this period. Whether you really want it to be considered a historical document or not is sort of up for debate, but at this time there were witnesses to these events. You did have the Babylonian captivity of the Hebrews. They do discuss the great Hittite and Egyptian kings. So when they go into discussion of Aaron's breastplate regarding, oops, I'm trying to let someone in, and I pushed the wrong button. But so when they go into discussion of Aaron's breastplate, as I just mentioned, with the gemstones, these are all period gemstones that we can look at for sources of Mesopotamian and Anatolian and Levantine and Egyptian Bronze Age jewelry. These were common stones of the period. Fiber shapes, colors, gemstones, and other findings. I already just gave you a quick rundown on the gemstones, but wool was the primary fiber. It is what it is. Linen was a luxury good. It was actually imported from Egypt. It went through Cyprus for additional processing before it was actually then shipped into Anatolia. And of course, linen doesn't hold dye that great either. So when you see anything colorful, more than likely it was wool. We have written documentation regarding madder, woad, and even murex purple for popular dye stuffs. There is a record that I located where madder was being shipped in with enough alum to be able to successfully dye with it. And so they were using the same mordants we use today. Things have not changed. So madder and alum give you that beautiful red. I'm actually wearing that right now. I will show when we progress through the slides. I am wearing a madder with alum woven belt. Shapes, very simple and rectangular. It was all done by loom with minimal sewing for maximum effect. Already touched on the gemstones. And then, of course, gold, silver, bronze, and copper of superior quality is preferred when coming into jewelry. The copper jokes are going to be all over the place. But for those that are not familiar, we are ribbing on a very specific Babylonian complaint tablet that is currently at the British Museum. So are there any questions so far? No, here comes Dulcia. Okay. Okay, so getting into the garments that I have constructed. So for my initial study, I focused on two complete ensembles, one based on the Hittite and Dede vases, and the other a depiction of noblewomen from the orthostates. They'll be referred to as dancer and noblewoman, respectively. All garments are constructed from minimal materials and seams, utilizing loom width for maximum efficiency. I attempted to source materials that were naturally dyed or at least passable with those palettes. Linen was substituted for wool for cost reasons. Super lightweight woolens, as we know, super expensive and difficult to find. So natural flax and bleached linens would have been an option. They may have been a luxury, but we do know that they had them. I can always update this stuff in the future when I do manage to fall into money or find myself a Bronze Age sugar daddy, I guess. Here is the Hussein Dede vase A, showing the dancers, and then my interpretation next to it. Let's talk about that. So first is the tailed tunic. So it's taken directly from the vase, as you can see. There's also evidence of this being worn in orthostates. You do see the tail peeking out of men's garments typically. I do not know if women wore this. It's difficult to say at this time, but you typically very rarely see women's undergarments anyway. As I was just playing today and I showed my husband, I think the tail can come up between my legs and tuck into a belt and serve as undergarments. So when I take my pictures this week, I will be taking pictures of that. It's gonna look weird. Everyone gets to see my pasty, ugly thighs, but for the sake of archaeology, we're gonna rock it. Tunic constructed from a simple pattern of 2 rectangles of bleached white linen at 32 inches wide, one elongated on the backside for the tail, joined at the shoulders right here, selvage edges. So I didn't do any extra hemming if I didn't have to. I used the finished edges. Neckline to eliminate hemming, and also, header bands as well, which are super popular. I'm sorry, I just blew that up. But a header band would have been a decorative band that was done usually along the selvage of wool to give it a decorative look. You see this a lot in Minoan dress. You do see it indicated in the orthostates, and I'll get to that in a second. But so I kind of wanted to use the selvage to almost give that look, and plus it's finished. So the short end on the tunic actually falls just above my knees. It looks very short here. I'm not sure if that was something I would willingly wear that short. So mine is probably a bit longer than it should be, but I also had to keep my own modesty into account. The pleated skirt. So I saw this skirt and I'm like, why does it look familiar? And then I have a copy of Ariadne's Threads, which I purchased to actually help support my work with Hittite. The Minoans wore pleated skirts like this. And Dr. Bernice Jones works out a pattern on how to make it out of wool. Now, the Minoan stuff was a bit more boxy in shape, as you will see in upcoming slides, with the wool, and then you roll it down. It doesn't appear to be that boxy on the Hittites. It's a bit more better shaped, which you can see here and then here. If you can, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but so I needed to actually get the pleats to lay flat rather than stick out. So here again, you have the Hittite version and then the Minoan version from the book next to it, and you see these very deep, boxy pleats coming out from the side, with sashes and the rolled down waistband. Uh-oh. Let's see what's going on in chat. Oh, you can see my mouse. Okay. I'm just catching up with the chat. I apologize. So here I am, not knowing what I'm doing a few weeks ago, trying to figure this out. I think I sent that picture to a few people like, ah! My friend's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. But so I took Bernice Jones's basic pattern, put the pleats flat, created knife pleats, rolled it down, and there it is. So there, and there you have it, as Jeff Goldblum would say, and it worked. And so here I have it tied with a belt underneath, but after wearing it today, I actually don't need that. By folding it down and creating that thicker waistband and more bulk at my hips, it's actually staying up just fine. And then I do have the red belt over that. Let's continue, enhance. All right, so there's my woven belt. Now, I did get actual madder dyed wool from an artisan in the UK. I couldn't find it stateside. It was just like, well, okay. But I ordered this a while ago, even before we were in quarantine. So I had this kind of on the docket anyway. I don't have wider looms. I only have an inkle loom right now. And while I could do something that wide, I didn't have enough on hand. I think something was weird and I screwed up my measurements. So I had to welt the band together in order to get more width. But as we will continue, you will see that there are lines in wider belts. And so whether it was welted together or not, I cannot say, or if it was woven pattern or felted, I cannot say. Either way, I managed to complete that look just by hand welting it together. The amulets are Hittite replicas from Turkey, because you can order jewelry from Turkey and get it here in a week, and I can't get stuff from like New Jersey that fast. It's absolutely ridiculous. As far as the ornaments go, like I do mention here, there is an artistic liberty to give a more Hittite appearance in using, like, you know, these kitschy Hittite replicas. We don't know what they were. I mean, there's no evidence exactly what's going on here. So I was like, okay, you know, I'll throw a little bling on there, you know, so it kind of looks like a coin belt, but not really. If we do find, you know, extant medallions or something along that, this is something that can easily be updated in the future. So I'm not terribly worried about it. And there's a close-up where you can see where I welted them together with a simple overhand stitch. And everything here is hand woven and hand sewn by yours truly. I might have bit off more than I can chew. I'm gonna take a drink real quick. Okay, so into my noblewoman now. So I have the tunic dress, and you can see it there on my ironing board, where I have just applied my woven trim and to give it the appearance of a header band. Again, it's very much constructed in the same manner that I did the white tunic. So 32 inches of coral colored linen, which very much in person looks more like a madder exhaust and not as orange as it's showing in these pictures. I did leave, you know, the neckline and the arms open. So again, very simple seams, minimal work. The orthostates do show the header bands or applied trim. I did weave the trim myself. It's a very basic tabby woven pattern on an ankle loom. So no fancy pickups or anything like that. It is wool, very simple. And then I had to manually fringe the heck out of it. And guys, this is not fun. It is not fun. It looks great, but man, my hands were killing me for days. And then here's some better shots where you can see the applied trim here. It gives a very complete, if not a bit of a rustic look, I think. So I don't, if we can find better examples of woven patterns during this period, I might be able to pull off something that looks a little bit better. And then there it is, just on my thinner mannequin, which is currently sitting behind me here, which after the PowerPoint I can go over. But and the hat. So the hat is just a cylindrical chunk of madder dyed felted wool. 2 layers I was able to get from an artisan here in the United States. Etsy is awesome. You can find some really cool stuff on Etsy if you know how to dig. Color might have been a little bit of a bad choice here, only because it's a little bit of too much of a similarity to a Turkish fez, but the materials are plausible for this period. The wool was felted. It is hand dyed in a supernatural dye, space natural dye that we know was used and very popular during this period. And I think that's more of the reason why I chose it rather than to pass the fez, obviously. The 2 layers, totally necessary to retain its shape. It's still a little crushable. It does hold up on its own, but probably not as good as it should. It's possible that it could have been supported with something else, or it could have been maybe starched, something to give it a little bit more volume. But for my initial attempt, I think that it worked out pretty good. And there it is. So you can see the 2 layers. It's beautiful, clearly hand felted wool, and the hand sewing and everything like that. And it is, unfortunately, like I said, getting a little crushed. So I need to figure out what I can do to kind of keep that up. But it does hold the weight of the veil up very nicely. Speaking of the veil, here we go. The veil, a simple 3-yard rectangle of linen, open weave, very lightweight. After I washed it, it was like gauze. I had to press the living snot out of it by soaking it and then really, really ironing it with a hot iron. It's super difficult from what we have to see if there was any shaping at all to these veils. I kept it simple. You have a length of cloth, you fringe everything, hand fringing just like I did. Of course, this is an open weave, so it went much faster to get 2 inches of fringe on everything. And that was pretty much that. It's not difficult, but it was a bit labor intensive to get there. And so here I is wearing the hat, and you can see how the fringe goes around my face, much like you see in the Ortho States. And then here it is draping over the mannequins, and it just looks absolutely lovely. It's also possible that this could have been wool gauze as well. In fact, it more than likely was wool instead of linen, but as a noblewoman, it could have been linen. We don't know. The belt. Okay, so I don't have this on hand yet. She just finished it yesterday. I do have pictures that you're about to see. So you see these banded belts or these striped belts in almost every image. In some images you see a few other designs, but these horizontal stripes seem to be what was in vogue. Now this is achievable in multiple ways. You saw how I welted the narrower bands together is an option. It could have also been felted like that. It could have had something applied to it or embroidered. It's super difficult to say. We have no records. So in this case, Mistress Elisif from Meridies wove me a wool belt from red and blue wool, and it is stunning. It is artificially dyed, but better living through chemistry. It's what we were able to procure in a short amount of time to get this done. It's about 6 inches wide, and there it is. And that is snappy. That is gonna look amazing against that dress. And yeah, I might have picked the blue and the red because I have the most documentation for it, but anybody knows in the SCA that color is period. Matching is whatever colors you could wear. And so showing these beautiful bright colors against another color is going to be like, oh. And if anything, it still creates this visual contrast. So even if it was something much more subtle, which honestly I don't think it was, you still create the visual impression of this woman wearing this textured or striped belt. And then, of course, onto the jewelry. I created 2 simple necklaces, one based on a chalcedony gold Hattite fine from Alachahoyuk, and the other is loosely based on the gold eagle and wire necklace. That's what I'm wearing right now at the British Museum. The chalcedony piece is constructed from modern necklace wire for safety. That way I don't hit it and goes ptoing, at an event. Gold-plated brass findings, large disc pendants from a supplier in Turkey, and natural chalcedony, which I found out was not that cheap. Chalcedony, by the way, is mined in the region, or in northern Turkey along the Black Sea. It used to be the region called Bithynia. And at first I was like, oh, I don't know how pretty it's actually going to be, but it is actually a lovely stone in person. So I'll show you that in just a moment. The wired necklace is brass wire because I'm Poe. And then brass hollow wire cut into 1-inch beads. And then I used these visibly Hattite and Hittite sun discs that were also purchased from a supplier in Turkey. I bought this before I really knew it might not have been really used on jewelry, but it is one of those super visibly Hittite symbols. So this is kind of a religious necklace. I feel super blingy in it. I do eventually want to cast those eagles and put dangly bits and stuff on it, but for now I have to admit this is it's kind of fun. I kind of want to wear it with like a little black dress and and see how I do. But here's the chalcedony one for you, and you can see, and that's the original in the middle. And then what I was able to achieve with, just like gold-plated beads, those discs that I purchased from Turkey, and then the natural chalcedony. And the chalcedony itself is actually quite luminous. It catches the light. It's not iridescent, but it's definitely I guess like a cloudy luminescence is a good term for it. And you can see here on the original that that is chalcedony and not rock crystal, just from that cloudy luminescence that the rock exudes. And then here's my crazy necklace. So the first one has the goddess in the middle of it, and I couldn't actually find, I bought it because it was labeled Hittite from one of the jewelry sellers in Turkey, but I couldn't actually document that particular goddess shape at all. And I'm sure it existed. It was used across, you know, basically the Semitic and Indo-European world for quite some time, but I decided to skip that and then throw on the massive dangly sun disk for extra. And at first I was like, I went to my husband, I'm like, is this too much? And he's like, it's the Bronze Age. There's no such thing as too much. And then what else I'll be wearing when I do complete my photos and are actually able to leave my house with this impression on. So the mirror that I have is constructed from true bronze. It's a historic replica completed by Sally Pointer in the UK. I believe this is actually a Roman mirror, but if you look at, you know, some of the Hittite sources that I just showed of women holding mirrors, it could easily pass. Like the shape had not changed at all. And I've wanted one of these bronze mirrors for a long time for my Greek and Roman kits anyway, so it actually works out great. Excuse me. And then the shoes, there's really no images of shoes. They called them Hattian shoes, and it basically just shows a pointed upturned toe with very little detail whatsoever. So I'm going to be wearing like a pair of Turkish yemeni that I use for my Byzantine impressions, and that will do until I can figure out something else. But so that is my project so far. I do have the website stub already up. And so within the next few days after I receive that belt and after I get those good pictures taken, that's going to go up. This class is going to be linked to on YouTube, and I hope that this is something that I continue. I'm losing my steam here, can continue to talk about more and study more as my research and obviously other individuals' research progresses in regards to this nifty area of the Bronze Age. So that is that. We're going to escape, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I will go ahead and open the floor for questions, and then I have a lot of things here on hand that I can obviously just do like a much more up close and personal show and tell. And I'm also going to get some more Dr. Pepper because whew.
So I have a question as well as a suggestion / recommendation for the shoes.
Okay.
What I would do is take a look at the New Kingdom Egyptian footwear, because after Thutmose III and some of the other pharaohs had wives from some of the other Near Eastern kingdoms, you start to see a lot more Near Eastern influences in some of their clothing. So I would take a look at those and maybe kind of use that as an experimental launching point to see what you can maybe come up with. And I can provide you some more sources for that. But I think it might be an interesting thing, especially with the pointy toe, because the Egyptians love that stuff.
Right, and Moses, I believe he did marry a Hittite queen, or had one in his harem or something like that. But
something like
that was that period where they were going back and forth all the time. So
yeah. The other question that I had was in regards to the earrings, because obviously they're quite large and blingy, and one of the things that you see especially a lot with the early Sumerian is these large lunate forms. So I was wondering if you had found any information about them yet, and if that was influencing it, or if that was still kind of like a placeholder for further documentation.
So we were joking for a little while how you have that idol at the Met where it looked like she's wearing plugs. I did actually find plugs. So they were wearing like big chunky spirals in their ears. So I'm like, yeah, gauged earrings for everyone. But for the most part, though, I think that those lunate is kind of going to be where it is, because you see that running the gamut from the Aegean Sea into Mesopotamia, and I think even into Persia. It was super popular. It was easy to produce. And I was going to wear something better today, but unfortunately they're breaking. I've had these for a while. These are actually 8 gauge, but I bend them to fit, so they'll actually stay in my ears. And unfortunately, I have killed them. They're dying. So I need to I need to buy a new pair. Otherwise, I would have worn these 6. They're much more passable for something Bronze Age than these are, but I still wanted to have a little bling. Yeah, I'm going to, and I think Jeff actually says, oh, we can make those. Don't buy them. You know, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, all right, fine. But we haven't gotten to that yet. So, but I think that's part of the next stage. I'm going to be making some more jewelry, including the Hattian belt buckle, which I think I have sent you a picture of before, where it's like the 2 discs and you put the pin through it. Because this is really, I don't want to say it's tight, but it is very close to the end of the belt. And I can see how beneficial that would have been to kind of just push things together and then even attach it to the skirt, because then it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So that might be the next evolution of the project as I move more into, like, you know, upper echelon society. But
excellent.
Next. Oh, come on, guys.
This may be a stupid question, but what was the loom that you guys would end up using for the fabric like this?
She used, let me see here. I actually have, she just got like a newer harness loom. Let me pull something up really quick from a previous PowerPoint that I did this week for a completely different thing, where I talked about my experimental archaeology for my job. But I'm just going to throw it on screen share again real quick, because I have pictures of both looms in this case. So, no, not start from the beginning. I don't know, can you guys see that? You probably see that just fine. But yeah, that is Harold eating my inkle loom, because he does that. And then he doesn't care about the thread. He likes to gnaw on my looms. And then this is Elisif's brand new loom that she just got. And so I got to pop the cherry on that one. I'm pretty proud of being her first project on that new one. So that gives you a sense. Obviously, these are modern constructs. Our modern SCA inkle looms, I believe, actually date to the 19th century. But you could have done something like a back strap. Warp weighted looms would have been much more popular in period as well, compared to what we use today. These are just much more convenient and a bit more portable, rather than setting up a whole warp weighted system and then me basically having to use a ladder to climb up and down in order to effectively weave a belt in my house. But is that helpful?
Yes, very. Thank you.
Okay, cool. But yeah, I can do a mean inkle, but I can't do those harness looms, man. But oh yeah, I just got a comment. You know, I don't have a question, just a comment. I'm stoked to see the whole outfit now. You've been hinting at it for so long. The anticipation was real. Yeah, I've been calling it Project X for those that don't follow me on Facebook, and like only really a handful of people knew what was going on. I had initially posted about it sometime last year. I'm like, I think I'm going to do Hittite, and then I had about 75 people like leech onto the project, started asking me questions I wasn't prepared to answer yet. And then here comes Jeff. I'm being fed. I like it. I like it. It's just like an event. I'm being fed as I teach. But and I was just like, I can't do this. And people shoving sources at me that were not relevant. Like, oh, I read this one book about the Hittites 30 years ago. Let me tell you a thing. And I'm like, no. And I know that's just how Skadians do. I know we're super helpful and we get super into things, but I've also been plagiarized. I've also had research leeches. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wait until I am ready. And so this past spring, thanks to quarantine, I've been able to revisit this, go through it, and actually complete my research. And so as I was starting to post pictures, like a few people knew what was up, and then some people were like, why are you fringing that much linen? What's wrong with you? You must be losing your mind, and blah, 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 blah. And yeah, I was in fact losing my mind, but yeah, so I'm glad that, you know, I'm at a point where I can start sharing the research and answering the questions. Obviously last year I was not. And especially when you're coming in as the first person to do something, I'm not going to lie, I am competitive. I didn't want anybody to steal this project from me. I wasn't going to let them steal this project from me. I was going to be the first, and I was going to be awesome, even though I'm sure there's stuff that's wrong, but that's part of the journey. And so I'm going to get this up this week. And then I'm going to use a very ancient Near Eastern term, I'm going to gird my loins and prepare for the onslaught, so to speak, because I'm sure I'm going to get the the quintessential, like, that's too early for SEA period, snottiness, and then I'm going to get this is some other snarky remarks, but I can't say I really care much about that. I did this, it was fun, it's different, and I'm looking forward to progressing with it. But we're now at 15 minutes of, so I know Arad is going to be switching channels to teach his class, which I'm going to go crash. But I say 5 more minutes or so of questions, and then we can call it a day.
I had another question about the construction of the tunics based on my knowledge of how the ancient Egyptians constructed their tunics and robes. You said that it's, kind of at the shoulder, and I see it has sort of the just the slit neckline. My question is it 2 separate pieces of linen that you've sewn together, or is it one piece that has a neckline put into it? Because I know for them, they basically just did block of linen, put in a neckline over the torso.
Mine has the 2 separate. So I have the shoulder seam, and my reasoning for that is the visible header bands. And you see that in both the Minoan and the Hittite dress. And that was like, okay, that makes sense. If you have a visible header band, that's your stitch line. So and then it gives you instant trim.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously I had to put it into that one. I don't have a loom. I don't have that mad skill. So
yeah. Another question. I know that this is still research ongoing. Have you found anything regarding any of the other forms of jewelry apart from the necklaces, the earrings, like finger rings, headgear, girdles, anything of that nature? Because I know with the Egyptians and the Sumerians, like literally bling for days. So I don't know if you found anything on the Hittites yet. I just would be curious to find out kind of what they wore as opposed to some of the other Bronze Age cultures of the time, since there was a lot more cross-culture exchange there than I think we really consider.
Oh, there was massive cross-cultural exchange, which you can see already in the skirt alone, between what we recognize as a Minoan design to a Hittite design. But I haven't seen much. Now, you do see in some of the ortho states these super ornately designed hats, and I'm like, oh, they covered them at Bling. Now, wait, hold on. The average women are almost always have their veils over their hats, so you really can't tell. When you do see a fully decorated hat, it's either on a goddess or on a funeral stele. So I'm like, death meant divinity. Did they decorate it? It's super hard to say. Also, the climate was greatly different between Egypt and Mesopotamia. It snows a lot on the steppe of Anatolia. They have winter. Those shawls were probably, like I said, they were probably wool. It gets quite chilly in the wintertime, and some of the documentation talks about Hattusa getting snowed in. So we might not find a lot of visible stuff because they probably covered up quite a bit. It was much chillier. The elevation was higher. It was a bit more arid. As far as rings go, I haven't seen too many rings, but again, the website for the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations is down. And of course, if I do like a general search, you get all sorts of random, as you know. You're like,
Yeah.
that's Hellenistic, that's Persian, you know. But considering, like you said, the cross-pollination, you know, the Scythians, the Lydians, those jerks, the Mitanni.
The fucking Mitanni,
The
honestly.
Mitanni. Um, and of course, you know, the Ahiawa, the Achaeans, the Mycenaean Greeks, and, you know, and everything. So you see all the joy. So it would not surprise me if they did. Another issue too that Jeff and I had actually discussed is that the reason why we might not have as much Hittite as we do, say earlier, like Hattitian, could be that gold was found and it was just repurposed. Because look at, you know, Anatolia was like back and forth for a long time. You know, after the Hittites, you had, you know, eventually the Greeks came in, they spread out. Hellenistic period, if they found gold, they were going to just take it and recast it into new stuff. That was antiques. This is like great grandmother's, like, you know, ugly costume jewelry. We're going to cast it into some coins of Alexander. You know, that's probably the realization is that that's probably what happened. Yeah. But and that kind of sucks as far as things go, because now we've lost, you know, so much to that. But that is, of course, the nature of very ancient art history, is that we're going to lose stuff and there's going to be questions that we're never going to be able to answer. But I do want to do more work on jewelry. So once things are back up and running, however long that takes, I will get in touch with people at the Met and then the British Museum and see if they know of anything, or it can get me in touch with somebody in Turkey that has a bit more knowledge regarding this stuff.
Excellent. Definitely keep me in the loop. And thanks again for such an amazing class. I loved it. I'm going to go and get mine ready, so I will see you there.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.